Admiral Zerr, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today. You called the Surface Warfare Combat Training Continuum Swick. What's the mission of Swick? What's the purpose of Swick?
Thanks, Francis. Great to be here on FedGov with you. Swick is a realization that our warfighters on surface ships have to be ready on day one. To take a quick step back in the CNO's lexicon, we're central to the foundry. But we connect with the fleet and to the fight. And so how do we do that? We set up the scenario where the combat watchstanders get the reps and sets that they need to be ready on day one. We certainly have learned a great deal in the Red Sea and in the 12-day war. There are things that are unforced errors. There are things that we could train to better. What we know is in the most pressing warfighting scenarios we could find ourselves in, we have to be ready on the very first salvo. And so what Surface Warfare Combat Training Continuum does, Swick, is it sets up the qualifications and the experiences we want. So think schools, think big training events throughout your career. Then it sets the training and readiness matrix, which is the reps and sets. In the surface force, we have historically, once you get certified, only tracked watch team training after that. That doesn't mean that every watchstander on that ship is actually getting the reps and sets across all the warfare areas. So what the training and readiness matrix does is it says in surface warfare, you need to do these activities every 90, 180 days. ASW, anti-submarine warfare, air defense, that these are the things you have to do to not just stay qualified, but to be proficient. Again, the objective is to get back to the point where we have high confidence that that watch team, when assembled, when they face a very challenging incoming threat, are ready to do exactly what they need to on the first moment of crisis. The last thing is the maritime warfare proficiency model. The idea here is that when we understand what everybody's experiences and training are, what their level of proficiency is with reps and sets, and then we add in other things like skill sets, background in education, aptitude, that we get an understanding of what each individual needs to get to the standard. The idea that we just say everybody at this level needs 15 of X, it doesn't actually represent the variation we see person to person in their skill sets and experience. And I think we can use our training scenarios, our simulators, in a better way to get everyone to the standard so they're just ready to fight when that moment comes. The last piece I would say to you is that I think in surface warfare, there's a growing understanding on the tactical side that there's a desire to be a master at this. And what the Swick program allows for is somebody to progress through from very rudimentary starting point to very complex best in the Navy kind of skill sets where they can achieve that. And then as a force, we see that on each ship, how many we have of each type. And we can even adjust those if we ever found ourselves in a moment where we wanted to plus up a ship.
Before we turn the cameras on, you talked about the fact that data is really important to the work that you're doing here. It's not surprising given how data-centric the Navy and all the services have become. How is data important to what you're doing with Swick?
Francis, great question. Two types of data. I would say data on training and readiness, and then there's data for warfighting. First one on the training and readiness. Under Swick, we are leveraging contractors and tools we already have that will display the data of where a ship is and where an individual is. When it was all spreadsheets and emails, or worse yet, when it was just a notepad, it's very tough to keep track, but then display it across a whole force where you have, 20 or 30 watchstanders, and then you have all the ships across all those ships. Now it's the computers do this for us, and it really is a warfighting advantage to know what that ship would need to get all the way to the standard, even as they're maybe transiting to an area of crisis. The other piece is actual combat systems data. What we've done in the Red Sea and in the 12-day war is we've taken data from our ships that was intended for long changes to combat systems, months, years kind of work. We have figured out how to get that information off in minutes, get it back to a group of my WTIs, so warfare tactics instructors, the contractors, and our warfare development centers. These groups that have come together of experts, where in minutes sometimes, or certainly within hours, we go back out to the ship and say, hey, maybe this is a setup recommendation for you. Or in other cases, we've actually pushed out changes to the software that the combat system uses to be better against the threats we're facing. So data is essential now for us to learn at speed and be successful. The difference, of course, is that we've been in a fight. The fight will be very different. And so our thoughts on data on the combat system side is not limited to what we've seen. It is to take what we've learned there and think in our minds, what would it take in a much more complex, much more high threat, and much more high tempo environment. That's what we're creating to actually process that data should we find ourselves in that fight.
We just have a couple of minutes left, Admiral. One of the things that struck me about Swick is historically training in the military has taken a tactical to strategic, short-term to long-term look. You're thinking about a surface warfare officer's career as a whole, and then it looks like bringing it back to the individual assignment that that person has at that moment. Am I looking at it the right way?
You have it right, Francis. The idea is, and having been commanding officer of a DDG, by the time you get there, you know everything. And when you're a division officer and you look up, you sort of think that guy or gal knows everything.
Yeah.
The truth is when you're in the seat, you realize there's all sorts of things you need your team to buffer you, or things that you were just never exposed to. Swick is to start from the beginning in these qualifications and experiences so that we actually know that when somebody gets to be XO or CO of a ship, hey, just because of their timing, their experience, they didn't do this thing. Let's go give them some training reps and sets so that they're more complete, and maybe even look at their team and say, hey, if that's a gap for them, how do I have a lieutenant or lieutenant commander that's extraordinarily strong, or executive officer for that commanding officer? We're going to learn a ton about how to make that combat team. What I don't want anybody to think is that the individual focus that Swick has, it is because when we get the individuals to a higher level, the watch team can perform at a much higher level. The watch team is always the end point for warfighting on a ship. It's not the individual. It is how those individuals come in and make that team operate at the highest possible speed correctly by our TTP.